Hey guys, welcome to the show. We've got a special broadcast today because I actually have a guest with me who I'm very excited to talk to. Um, when I started this channel a couple years ago, I was really hoping to come across people like Elsie King. Um, when I started the channel, I just assumed that I would kind of meet my tribe and meet, folks that I get along with. Maybe we have, research interests in common, things like that. And LC is someone that I got introduced to pretty early on, in my journey here with symbolic studies. And his work, I feel like, really complements some of what I'm doing pretty nicely. But what's brought us together as of late is kind of our shared interest over Northern symbolism, the world axis, polar symbolism, things like that. So we've kind of been geeking out a little bit behind the scenes on some of these topics. And he has brought a handful of things to my attention that I had not looked into or really considered. And so it's really cool just the fact that we've come to similar conclusions, but from different angles. And I really appreciate that fact about him. If you're not familiar with his work, Elsie King is known for doing deep dives on symbolism, sacred geometry, mythology, gematria, music theory, and the electric nature of our reality. And so definitely check out his work if you're unfamiliar. I have his links in the description of this video. Um, and yeah, it's just a pleasure to be able to talk to him. He was down not only to talk, but to put together a little presentation for us that we're going to go over. And it kind of turned into something of a hybrid where I put in my 2 cents with a couple of things. But for the most part, this is absolutely his work and his angle, as you guys will see. And what we're going to be talking about today is astrology and the zodiac, and specifically how the signs of the zodiac have a lot of kind of polar symbolism baked into it. A lot of northern symbolism can be found within the signs of astrology, and also lots of mercurial symbolism. And a lot of these signs have a relationship with what he, usually refers to as like a triune god, the three in one. And I agree with him. And so there's a lot to get into here. But please welcome me, or please welcome him to the show. Please help me in welcoming LC King to Symbolic Studies. And here he is. Lucas, how you doing, man?
G'day. Thanks for having me, Mario. It's an absolute honor.
Right on, dude. Yeah, no, this is great. Like I was saying, our work, I feel like, kind of complements each other nicely. And so you have brought a lot of things to the table that I had not considered when it comes to polar symbolism or northern symbolism. And I'm just really stoked to get into kind of what you have put together today regarding astrology. And that's something that you've kind of brought up to me over the last couple of months. I've seen you in live chats and stuff, and you're saying that the signs are all just aspects of northern symbolism or polar symbolism. And I'm like, I can totally see that. And so the fact that you wanted to kind of get into this for the show, I think is awesome. But before we get too deep into anything, you want to tell us a little bit about yourself and your story, if you don't mind?
Yeah, sure. Just want to say that, like, when looking at this stuff, like the work that you've done is totally helped me understand it even further as well. So there's a reciprocal type nature to how we're communicating. And yeah, these sort of topics that you dive into, or the aspects, sort of help me get a better idea of it. And so, I feel like over the last few months, we've really um, this sort of work has gone exponential in how we've understood it because of that sort of back and forth communication sort of thing that we've done.
Yeah,
But
absolutely.
for me, I sort of started this my YouTube stuff with the electric side of things, looking at batteries and whatnot, and how that relates to the world. So electrochemistry is the broad term for it. But yeah, after a while of looking at the electrochemistry side of things, you could see the trinity involved in the makeup of the energy transfer, if you like. So you're just really looking at the polarity of um, the two terminals, where you have a negative and a positive, and then you had to have a communication between those two to create the energy. You have to join the wires together, if you like, and put the light bulb there, and those sort of things. So that sort of aspect of it started to really bleed over into my understandings of mythology, which was always in the background, like mythology and all those sort of esoteric type ideas, I guess, have always been a part of my world in a sense.
Yeah. Right, right. Well,
So
it shows. Absolutely. So, regarding this information, I think we're pretty much in agreement that we're kind of going through, or perhaps have gone through, something of a paradigm shift with some of this stuff. How would you describe that to people? Maybe for those who maybe aren't aware of kind of sort of the rabbit hole that we've found ourselves in over the last year or two regarding Northern symbolism.
well, it really, the underpinning of it was really the fundamental shift in how we view our world, right?
Hmm.
The cosmology that we're losing the heliocentric cosmology, and moving over to the original polar cosmology. And so with that, there's just when you put it into the right context, things present themselves. And so that's what's really been the driving force of all this, is that we put it into the polar context, and then all of a sudden, it just makes sense. And so that's what's really been that sort of driver, is that cosmological understanding.
Yeah, no, absolutely. For me, it just really feels more like a complete holistic system, and you're really getting to the nuts and bolts of everything. And that's kind of been the big thing for me is when I was really doing all of my astrological content, I felt as though I was gaining a lot of valuable information. I felt as though um, I was clearly learning a lot, but I feel like there was still something that kind of wasn't like holding everything together. I felt like
Yeah.
there was still a little bit of chaos within that system. And then once I started coming across, the world axis material, northern symbolism, things started to make a lot more sense because the world axis, symbolically, what it represents is what its function is it brings order. And so to
Mm,
me, that's kind of what it's been. It's like it's brought order to a situation, the same way it's believed that the world axis has brought order, to the universe, right? Or the way you put it, I really love the fact that you're really diving into, or dove into, the threshing floor sort of
mm,
analogy and what that represents. And so again, the world axis, very much related to the North Star. All you have to do is look in the night sky, and you're seeing all of the stars in the heavens revolve around the pole star. And so the world axis symbolically, I feel as though it's almost like it's just an evolution of my symbolic awareness, essentially. you know
mm. Yeah,
so
yeah,
um
exactly. Yep.
so it's been huge that way. So the fact that you want to decode astrology through this lens, or through the triune God sort of perspective, I think makes a lot of sense. And you didn't have to really convince me that this is kind of the deal or the case. It's all right there for you.
Well, you sort of get to a stage where, and the way I research is sort of very broad, if you like. I like to look at a lot of different things, and don't just stick to one sort of dive in, be sort of Renaissance, a Renaissance man in the way I research, in a sense. You just go to all different topics to try and find the common thread. And then when you do that long enough, you actually see the same symbols over and over and over again. Doesn't matter what culture you go to, they're the same symbols. And
Hmm.
then you put it into the context of the polar cosmology, and then the symbols automatically just make sense because they are part of that. So, um, yeah, at this stage, it's like I'm a little bit overwhelmed by how much, because you get used to what you're seeing. And so, yeah, I'm sort of getting a little bit overwhelmed with how much actual information sort of relates back to that same source.
That's right. Yeah, it's truly all over the place. So it has changed my research forever,
Mm.
100%. And it's changed how I decode, essentially,
Oh,
and when I process information and I'm listening to a show or whatever, I'm reading a book, I'm like, this is still like relevant. This is relevant information. If only they understood kind of, this aspect that we're getting into, I think that they would get a lot more out of it. Um, right. So, I guess with that said, is there anything you want to bring up or discuss before we get into the slides here that you've graciously put together for us, or should we just dive in?
oh, let's dive in because yeah, there's a lot of material here. And
Yeah.
it was more like I done like 54 slides, so we'll see how far we get through it. But um, there was more like what don't I include, and how
Yeah.
far down each little, because you could do a slide about a certain subject and then you could do a whole hour's talk on just that singular slide in a sense,
Hmm, hmm.
because of what it relates to. So it's really sort of cutting it short and trying to bring a really nice overview, hopefully, for everyone.
Yeah, yeah, no, absolutely. For sure. And, I just recently put out my What is Northern Symbolism video. Maybe it's been a
Mhm.
few weeks now or something like that. And, I wanted to create kind of like a nice, concise, sort of like introductory video for people. And the most difficult part was what to exclude, and what to
Yeah.
include. Because I was in the same exact boat. I was really overwhelmed. I was like, I feel like all of this is relevant, but obviously I can't include everything. And so that's a true sort of paradigm shift, like I'm talking about, is it really is relevant to so many different things and so many different topics, from mythology, right, just to straight symbolism, astrology, like we're talking about, sacred geometry, et cetera, et cetera. So that's pretty
And
much
even
why.
like even like mundane things, like I decoded my shoes the other day, and it was like
Oh,
it's
yeah.
all northern symbolism. It was, yeah,
I can't say I'm surprised, to be honest. But no, you're
it's
totally right.
everywhere.
Exactly. Yeah, when I go on a hike or a walk or whatever, I'm just looking at the natural world around me, and I just see, world axis symbolism in the trees and the plants and everything else. So
Yep.
that is the deal. So one thing I will say is that we're going to be checking out these slides, and obviously what we're going to do is go through the signs of the zodiac. And we're starting off with Pisces, actually, which I think is a little different from what most people are used to, but it does make sense. And you can kind of explain why you think that makes sense. And then we've included some tarot cards as well, based on my suggestion, I believe. And you have a different correspondence with some of the signs and the cards that associate with the signs. And so that's just a difference of opinion. And that's the whole entire thing with symbolism and with correspondences, is there's multiple systems, and so there's multiple systems, there's different ways of breaking things down. I think there's always room for evolution and interpretation for all of this stuff. I have different decks that I probably have decks that literally there's like four different systems that I can kind of point at, where some people say, the moon card, as an example, should be ruled by the moon and not Pisces, and so there's all of this difference of opinion. So we've included the cards that you think make sense, and then we've also included the cards that I think make sense. And the perspective I'm coming from is definitely more of like the traditional Western esoteric sort of thing. And so just a heads up about that. But with
Yeah,
that
I
said,
messed you up. I messed you
oh,
up
no,
with
no,
that.
you're all good. You're all good, dude. I love it, dude. I think there's people in our community that have wildly different takes on things. And I feel like there's always more to gain and learn just from hearing someone's perspective on that kind of stuff. And so I'm all about it. Like I said, there's room for evolution and improvement and everything else. So it's no worries on my end.
And it doesn't bother us at all either, because we'll see that each of the cards relate back to northern symbolism anyway. So the way I've described it is the avatars of that central triune god. So expressions of it.
Right, right. And so I guess the last thing I'll say before we get into the slides here is the way I personally feel about it is what I think has kind of happened symbolically over time is very similar to what a lot of people think happened with the cradle of civilization. And it's this idea that humanity was actually closer to the pole, and that this pole, this world access concept, the sacred center concept, was more of like a normal thing for people, and
Mm.
was just how they based their reality, was having this central sort of like temple or point within their region that was like heavily revered, was kind of considered maybe an access point to other realms or whatever. It reminds me very much of the world tree, or like having a family tree, and there's a lot of books and there's a lot of people out there who think that the cradle of civilization actually existed in the north, and then at one point, was drawn away from the north for various reasons. Basically, the big thing that is always said is that there was some sort of catastrophe or flood
Mm.
or cataclysm or what have you, and so they had to leave that northern paradise, right? And so I think the same thing happened symbolically, is that
Yeah.
humanity was a lot closer to the world axis and what that all represented, and then we've moved away from the pole. And so in a way, this is kind of like a pole shift that some people talk about. And so what
Mm.
we're doing here is we're going back to the pole, and we're saying, hey, a lot of these astrological signs, a lot of occult symbols, a lot of symbols that people are familiar with, there's actually a northern polar sort of correspondence here, that is really little, understood, and definitely not really talked about all that much. And so I think we're doing, a service here for people who are interested in this information. So that is to say, you can decode things symbolically through this polar northern sort of perspective. You can decode anything that way. And so this is kind of what we're into right now. And so that's kind of partly what the slideshow is about too, is almost giving us a really, really awesome, great excuse to kind of talk about all of these different symbols that I've heard you talk about, over the last year or two and everything else, and kind of just allowing us to decode it through this lens. So with that said, let's get started here.
Okay.
All right, so slide one, and just let me know whenever you want to progress or
Yep.
go back or anything like that.
So we've sort of summed this up a bit, but the basic premise of this talk is that each sign of the zodiac is an avatar of the one singular triune god that consists of the masculine, feminine, and the joining of masculine, feminine into one. So pretty
Right.
straightforward. You can sort of see that in that symbol there as well, where you have the black and the white, and the white and the black in each other. So,
That's
and it's
right.
just a singular whole symbol.
100%. And it just reminds me too of the churning of the cosmos,
Yeah.
and all of that, all the symbolism related to that, including the threshing floor and everything, for sure.
Hmm. So this is the basic toroidal field, and it's the same as a magnet, really. So you have a north and a south, and then that neutral plane in between, which is the joining of the north and the south.
Right.
And so this is the sort of world axis.
Yes. Yes. Exactly right. For sure.
So yep, that sort of diagram is an example of the world tree in essence. Its branches are the heavenly sort of sphere, the up above us, and then the roots go down below us. So that trunk is then the axis of the world, or that pillar.
Right. Right. And I just want to point out too that tree and three, right? Just those words in and of itself is just a difference of an H. And so I see a lot of three symbolism as it relates to the tree. And a lot of mercurial symbolism, I think, right, goes back to the three. And when you're looking at that tree, I can't not think about the three different parts of it, the roots, the trunk, and then the branches as well. So
And
that's
it also
definitely.
relates to true as well.
Ooh,
Tree
nice.
and true. Yeah. It's just one letter difference with the E and the U.
Right, right, exactly. And so I've gone over this in other presentations, but my understanding is that there is indeed an electromagnetic field around Earth, and that the northern opening is towards the it's the northern part of Earth, so that's the aurora borealis effect.
Hmm.
And there is lore out there that suggests that we ascend through the north upon death, and that this is kind of the access point to other realms, and that psychopomps and things like that, guides of souls, conductors of souls, will use this as a bridge or a gateway to other places. And of course, the trunk itself, very much operates the same way. The whole entire tree operates that way. But I'm particularly interested in the northern opening around Earth.
Hmm.
All right.
So when you see this tree from above, you're looking down on the world, and so this is where you get the symbol of the monad. It's basically that central red point in the center is the trunk, and then the whole boundary of it is the tree itself, or the whole world. And so
Right.
rather than being a solar symbol, the monad is actually a polar symbol or a world symbol,
Mm.
a universal symbol.
Yeah, I agree. It seems to me like it started off as a geocentric symbol. As a lot of symbols, I believe that's the case, is that they started off as more of a geocentric symbol, an earth-based symbol, as you're saying, and then later perhaps got adapted to being, a solar-based symbol. And all you have to do is just look at the red, right? And you see the glyph for the sun, the circle with the dot right in the middle. And I can't not point out the fact too that if the lines were a little thicker and the center dot was a little thicker as well, that it would kind of look like an aerial view of Saturn too, which I think is interesting. The rings of Saturn with that circle right in the middle. But what were you going to say?
Uh, yeah, that was it. But it's when you're looking at the two different models of like the polar model and the heliocentric model, the sun is in the center of for the heliocentric model is in the center of the solar system, if you like.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
so it replaced the polar model, which would have your sort of magnetic north at the center and the sun moving around that magnetic north. So yeah, the sun got placed in that center point. So any names and symbolism that was originally to do with the world axis got shifted onto the sun. So the sun actually amalgamated it, and so even the word sun, you can say that, well, maybe it wasn't originally meant for the ball of light in the sky, if you like.
Right. Yeah. I told you the other day, maybe it was just yesterday, but I read your article that you had written to prep for your recent Crow interview. And if
Mm.
people haven't checked that out, definitely check that out. But you make a relationship and a correspondence with the world axis actually being the child within this Trinity triune God symbolism, which I
Yep.
think is really, really interesting. And so, as you say this right now, because I read that article, because I listened to the show, I feel like I just understand that a lot better now. But
Yep.
yeah, I think that's brilliant. The other thing I'll say is sometimes, I know you've been around for a while looking into cosmological things, geocentrism, etc. As have I. Sometimes I think that the monad itself, the circle with the dot, might be the most honest map we have of this reality that you can actually
Yeah.
get.
Yeah.
That's really what it boils down to, is just the circle and the dot, and everything else, is kind of up for debate. But there certainly is this sacred center, which everything appearing seems to emanate from, and then there is this exterior as well. So
Yep.
sometimes whenever I see the monad, I'm like, that's where we live. you know I don't know if you
Yep.
feel the same way, but yeah.
And it's also sort of depicting the masculine and feminine as well, where you have
That's
the
right.
point and the circumference. It's
That's right.
also relates to how a compass works. So that point in the center is where you sit the compass and then you draw the pencil line around it. And so the first form is really pi, is really the center, that circle. And so this is why, in a lot of ways, Mercury is the god of geometry as well. and you'll see God, how pictures of God with the compass in the hands and those sort of things. But this is also, you can look at it as looking down on the world, but you can also look at it as looking up. And if you're looking up, then that central point is Polaris.
Right. Yeah. No, exactly right. And also too, if you're looking at it from a 2D perspective, right, looking at it from the top down or from the bottom up, if you actually turn this into like a 3D model, it's possible that that center point is actually a pole itself, that it actually extends, and that you're looking at a pole within a hole, essentially.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So the world axis there. Well, right on.
So this is another version of it showing the tree and that monad. So you've got the trunk. This is looking top down on a tree. And you can, this is one of the main things with the tree is it's the archetype of unity and diversity. And so this is a little saying that goes with it, unity and diversity and unity, because there's multiple branches and it spreads off, like lightning, if you like. And then um, it's got all those different branches, but it's still the one tree. And
Mm-hmm.
and so this is a main part of understanding the world in a sense, because there's a unity to our world, a connection between everything. But there's also this individuality that's going on as well, or the polarities that keep happening as well.
Right.
So
Right.
it's
Right.
this movement between the one and the two.
That's right. Yep, exactly. Um, for sure. I just did a presentation on the magician's wand, and I got into this separation connection sort of thing as well with the world axis. But yeah, no, well put. Unity and diversity in unity. And I can't not point out the eye symbolism too, which is just like really, really prominent, especially in this slide.
Yeah. So this is an image I found a long time ago, but it was a perfect representation of this is like those old world dome structures, and you'll have Mercury holding up the sky,
Mm,
in that center point being that bridge between the lower and the upper. So I just thought this image really sort of helps encapsulate what we're trying to say with that the Mercury character being the trunk of the tree, if you like.
right, right. You know, it's fascinating, man. I'm so glad you included this. I've come across older buildings where, like, the tower, the very, very tip of the building itself, the highest point, actually has a statue of Mercury, and he's doing the exact same thing. He's
Hmm.
doing the as above, so below thing. He's holding up one arm, and he usually has like a caduceus in one of his hands, the one that's pointed up, right?
Yep.
And to me, I'm just like, that is fascinating that, this whole entire building, this really complex structure that probably costs a lot of money to create and a lot of time and effort just to get off the ground and everything, that they basically use the symbolism of Mercury at the very, very top of the building. I wonder if if there's an etheric sort of antiquitech connection with this as well. So that's just me kind of speculating or whatever. But it
Yeah.
seems like it's not just symbolic, that there might be a good reason for putting Mercury up there as well, that they're alluding to something else.
Yeah, well, in a sense, Mercury is the god of communication as well.
Mm,
So it's
absolutely.
between something, like I was saying, it's the unity and the polarity, or the diversity, and it's that connection between. So anytime you see a connection between two things, that's where Mercury is, because that's why it's really the masculine and the feminine joined together, right? Because it's bringing polarities together and bringing the communication.
That's right. That's right. He represents the whole spectrum. He can go from, extreme, positive to passive.
Mm.
He is the middle way for sure. And obviously, this illustration just really highlights that too, or this photo rather. Very cool.
So, without going too deep into this, we're just seeing some of these are what I think is some of the origins of this central pillar idea as well, or at least more connections. And we've got the gnomon of the sundial, which relates directly to the threshing floor, which you see these horses there. They're connected to that central pole as they move around in a circle. And so horses have a huge connection to the power behind the turning of the universe, if you like, and they are directly linked to that central pillar.
Mhm.
But yeah, and it's they're related directly by their words as well, like horse, Horus, and hours, and those sort of things link up. So, um, but I just thought I'd include this to show that that monad symbol was functional in a sort in a couple of different ways as a sundial and as a process for um, agriculture.
Right, right. Yeah, that makes so much sense. And this was not something I had considered prior. So you're the one who introduced me to this, but I love it, man. I think it's a deep rabbit hole that anyone can go down. But yes, this is when we're dealing with the world axis, you're dealing with an axle as well, like the axle of the universe or the heavens or the cosmos. And
With
so
the
it
bearings.
with the bearings, yeah. Oh man, I love it. That's great.
Yeah, because you got the 2 bears.
Yeah,
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 they're
yeah,
the bearings of the
absolutely.
wheel. Yeah.
For sure, Ursa Major and Minor. So very much similar symbolism here, and then the fact that it was also connected with time, as being a sundial. That's brilliant, man. I love that. Very, very cool.
Yeah, well, going into the time rabbit hole as well, nearly all these gods are related to time. And it's this duality going on between eternity and like your limited time span, or the world of change and the world of eternal sort of um, unity, if you like. And so
Right.
that pillar becomes the symbol of timelessness, and it holds the cosmos together. In a sense, it's the firm foundation of the world, because yeah, time's a deep rabbit hole, and it's all these gods are connected via time because they sit above Mount Olympus, and
Mhm.
Olympus is the world of change in a sense, and they sit above it. Um, and yeah, so that's where you sort of get a lot of the time sort of stuff coming into it. Time gods like Saturn and Kronos, and it relates to horology, which is related to the horse, which
Gotcha,
is all
gotcha.
about time. Yeah.
Right, right. No, exactly. And the horse symbolism too. You exposed me to a lot of new things with all of that, which I really appreciate and love. But you're right. The world axis, it's very much related to tradition and this timelessness sort of thing, and this still point. The same way Polaris obviously is like a still point in the sky, and it's all of the stars that revolve around it. And I thought it was really interesting in one of the books I'm reading right now, The Celestial Ship of the North, which I know you kind of read through a portion of it. At one point, the author says that Christianity, excuse me, was demonizing northern constellations and northern stars for being too slow,
Huh.
because they're just circling right around, Polaris, and they're trying to say that you're better off worshiping the sun. The sun is much faster. The sun is more brilliant. It comes and goes
Right.
every single day, and so they were actually kind of smearing these northern stars for having this slow, sort of timeless quality to it, which I thought was really interesting. They were saying that the bears are lumbering and lazy and things like that. And so I just think that's
Oh
kind of
wow.
fascinating. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah, yeah. So there's a
That,
whole
that's
history
that's
here.
so interesting because it really did like in essence, when you have that sun worship or that sun cult sort of stuff, you're really polarizing your own sort of mental activity, which is it's just so interesting to when you start to see the difference between the two and what they represent. Yeah, they're chalk and cheese,
Right, right,
hyper
right.
polarized. Yeah.
Yep, yep. No, exactly. All right.
So these are just older traditions. This is the maypole, and it's just you can see it was just part of culture to have this idea of the world tree and celebrations around it. So I just sort of bring this one in because it relates to just culture and people understand that
Right.
relationship, that it's very real for people in a sense. It wasn't just um, some idea on a bit of paper.
That's right. That's right. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, there's a lot to be said about the various traditions that make use of a pole or of a sacred center or a world axis symbol. But yeah, the maypole, that's a great example to show for sure.
Hmm. And this one's interesting because you get a lot of people when they look at these gods or deities or whatever, and they'll have this circle behind their head. Especially in the Christianity sort of um, symbols as well. You'll see the circle behind the head. Now, in etymology, it does sort of link it to the sun, but once you get used to the northern sort of understanding, then you say, well, no, it's not really about the sun. It's actually relates back to the threshing floor, and that's where this you get this link. Halos
Mm,
is from the threshing floor. So just the head in the center of the circle is another sort of depiction of the monad.
mm.
So it's the mind in the center as well. There's a lot of connections to the mind and this, you know, mercurial figure, if you like.
Oh yeah, no, absolutely. The first hermetic principle is all is mind,
Mm.
so there's that. But also too, I just want to point out, you're totally right with this halo idea. When you look at older artwork or statues or paintings or whatever, just because there's a circle behind a head, it doesn't necessarily mean it's a solar symbol. And there are overt examples where literally the tradition states that it's actually not the sun. And so the first one I think of is Myokin, which is a Japanese deity. He's a pole star deity, and he has the exact same thing behind his head. And if you didn't know any better, you would just assume that it's a solar reference, or you might even assume that it's a lunar reference. But in
Mm.
actuality, it's a polar reference. And so it's like publicly acknowledged that he's a pole star deity and that the disc around his head is indeed the pole star. And then related to the pole sort of idea too, as it relates to polar symbolism, lunar symbolism, and solar symbolism, we're going to get into it a little bit later in one of your slides. But in Freemasonry, it's not uncommon to have three pillars. One pillar has a sun on it, one pillar has a moon on it, but then it's the central pillar. It'll usually have like an all-seeing eye on it or something along those lines. So to me it's like there's polar symbolism. The pole, literally the pillar, relates to the sun, the moon, and the pole star, but I would argue originally it's the world axis, the polar connotation that came first, and then that polar symbolism was basically borrowed, if you will, and used for both the sun and the moon.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that makes sense. And it's also when you're dealing with time as well. The sun, the moon, and the stars are all parts of that time-based system, so you can see them as one thing as well.
That's
Um,
right.
so you can see the Trinity operating in many levels, in a sense.
Yep.
Um,
Yeah,
but
you got it.
yeah, that's right. It is originally a polar symbol. So cool.
Yeah, that's how I tend to see it.
So this one's just to show this between it's a little bit of mathematics or geometry, if you like, between the unity and the diversity. So this is the mathematics between the one and the two, and you're using the geometric mean to find the medium position between those two. And what you actually find, it's the square root of two, um, which is really interesting because you get names that come out of it, or the gematria that is for Apollo, Hermes, and Zeus are all related to the square root of two and the square root of three. So these they're sort of deities that are built upon certain ideas and certain proportions that are very special in relation to these polar ideas and the Trinity and so forth.
Right, right. No, that's great. And that's one of the things I appreciate about your perspective too is your sort of way with math is really impressive. And it's not how my mind tends to work, but you make a really good case that a lot of symbols really and a lot of myths, it's all mathematical when you really break things down. And you've proven that point many times.
Yeah, that's right. So there's the gematria portion of things where you apply basically the alphabet to the numbers. But then there's the straight up just geometry. And I recommend to everyone grab yourself a compass and a straight edge and draw the vesica and build these things on your own and start to work out what's actually going on in them. And those things will express the symbolism to you, and we'll go into that a little bit further. But there's a definite reason why they're celebrated. These shapes are celebrated because of what they represent and what they actually mean to the logic, in a sense.
Right.
And mathematics is a universal language. It is like a timeless language, whereas you have I've made the point before that there's a difference between sort of the normal spoken language and written language that we use is very liquid. It changes over time, and it's part of the world of change in a sense. Um, but when you're dealing with mathematics, it is a stationary type language. It doesn't move. It's like the world pillar itself, in a sense that it's timeless. One and one will always be two. So it has that timelessness quality to it. So it is associated with that world tree.
Yep. Yeah, exactly. And I think that there's a direct correspondence between the number one and literally what it looks like and the world axis as well. So it's just right there, the first number, which I think is fascinating.
Well, it's got the one and the zero for the
Poles and
monad.
moles.
So yeah, it's
Yeah,
got the
yeah.
number 10.
Yep, yep,
So
yep. Exactly
yeah.
right. 100%.
The other connection that I made that was really significant into how I started to view some of the mythologies, and that was this connection between the idea of wind and water, which is mind and matter. And I saw this because I was looking at a lot of the masculine gods, if you like, and they're all to do with the air or the space above us. So they'll have stuff to do with clouds, with day and night, with thunder, lightning, and all those sort of attributes are associated with that um, lightness of the air.
Right.
And so anything to do with wings, with birds, and all that sort of stuff, anything to do with the sky, has a correspondence to mind. And the opposite sort of tends to be true, that we're dealing with anything that has a watery nature is to do with the mother, with the matter, and the matrix.
Mm,
So it's this dichotomy or this duality of mind and matter, and essentially Mercury is mind and matter and is wind and water, represented by winter, actually, which is the two words joined together.
mhm.
And, and so Mercury is that sort of bridge between mind and matter. And that's what we are built of. We have the capacity for thinking and mind stuff, but we also have this physical body as well. And there's no distinction between the two, in a sense. We don't know where one begins and the other stops.
Yeah.
And so that's just our reality of being in this world. So this is just a very important concept that helps us understand whenever we see watery stuff in mythology, we're dealing with the material world and matter. Whenever we see air type correspondences, we're dealing with the mind.
Right. Yeah, it reminds me too of the fact that Mercury, astrologically corresponds with an air sign in Gemini and an earth sign in Virgo. And so
Mm.
it reminds me of the mind and matter sort of thing. And then Mercury itself, Quicksilver, it's just it's liquid metal basically. So absolutely the watery sort of thing with Mercury obviously is absolutely there, but yeah, man, this is great. So moving on.
Hmm. I added this. We don't have to go through it all the way. People can sort of screenshot it, um,
Mhm.
but it's using that mind and matter, um, feminine, masculine, mother, father, these sort of ideas, and then creating a polarity out of them. And so here's a long list that I sort of created that can help to really show the polarities used in mythology. So whenever you see stuff to do with the head, then
Mm,
you sort of go, well, that's to do with the skies, the mind, the masculine, and then anytime you see the feet, you're dealing with the waters, the material, and so there's all these different expressions of it
mm.
that can really help to start to understand what they were talking about in mythological sort of stories and those sort of things. So they're not so obscure, if you like.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, all you have to do too, people who have studied, maybe some of the work of Santos Bonacci or other astrologers or whatever, but it's really common to associate Aries with the head and then Pisces with the feet as well. And so there's lots of head symbolism, masculine symbolism related to Aries, and then very watery sort of symbolism, obviously with Pisces itself. So yeah, no, this is a great list, and you have so many correspondence lists too. I can't even imagine, what your file system looks like over there, because you've sent me lots of things over the last like year or so, and you bang these things out, man. It's cool. I like
Yeah.
it. So yeah, if you get value out of this, feel free and screenshot it. All right, so here we are at Pisces.
Yep. So, I take, for me, Pisces is mainly a geometrical form, and anything to do with it is from, and what that geometrical form represents. So they have the two fish, and you can actually see the two fish within the geometrical form. One goes one way, and then one goes the other way. So they're sort of opposites in that sense. But the two circles coming together are really like they're mirrors of each other. It's this separation of the two circles, and one's a masculine and one's a feminine. So born out of the joining or the crossing of these two circles is that mercurial sort of figure in a sense, because it's the two polarities are emerging together. And what you actually get out of the vesica is just phenomenal in a sense for mathematics as well. It is really like they call it the mother of all shapes, and you're getting measurement out of it in a lot of ways. You get the square root of 2, the square root of 3, the square root of 4, 5. You get the triangle, all these different. You get phi, and there's another one that comes out of it. But it really is, in mathematical terms, like the most special geometrical figure.
Right, right, right. Yeah, exactly. And so the feminine nature of it, right? Which is why you're putting it first here, is this is more of it's a reference to the primordial universe and the idea that the feminine came before the masculine. And so when you're relating this to astrology, starting off with Pisces with the feminine, and it's like one of the most, I'm trying to think of the right word for it, but it's almost like one of the most etheric sort of primordial feminine sort of perhaps even chaotic sort of signs out there. I would say, giving birth to this masculine energy that is Aries. I think makes a lot of sense. It kind of reminds me of like the Queen of Heaven or Sophia giving birth to the Demiurge or something like that, the Son of Light.
It's funny every time you try and pinpoint, is it the masculine first or the feminine first, or the Mercury character first? Because a lot of ways, when you have the Mercury character is Jesus, and he's like the beginning and the end.
Mm,
And so you sort of can't differentiate which one comes first in a sense, because it's like the chicken and the egg, you just don't know. So you could go at this all day long and try and figure out which one actually came first, but I don't think it's a never ending story in a sense. But
you're
you're
right.
right. The womb is, in natural terms, is the birth of reason. And this is where you get the ideas of this the what is it, over chaos, order out of chaos. Those sort of ideas come into play. So chaos being that watery matter, the matrix, and then the order that comes out of that is starting to put that material into correct shapes. And this vesica is the sort of first bit of that actually starts to bring order out of that.
Right, right, right. Gotcha. No, exactly. And I hear you loud and clear with that too. It reminds me, it's like a toroidal sort of thing,
Yeah.
as well. You're just looping back around, in and out, etc. Also, just want to point out too, it's not uncommon to see depictions of Pisces where like the tails are attached, or there's a ribbon or a cord between the fish of Pisces as well. They're always connected. And when you look in the night sky, that's what Pisces kind of looks like. It looks like it's the singular breaking off actually into two. And so it looks as though it's two fish coming from, one central location, or I know it's been kind of like allegorized as, one stream that's splitting off into two streams. So
Mm.
sometimes it's looked at as two streams that are splitting, um, you know. So just thought I would point that out. But yeah, good stuff, dude.
That's interesting you say that, like, because the world tree is sometimes depicted with a river between it or next to it. And this is
Mm-hmm.
like the Milky Way is that river or that
Mm-hmm.
stream. So yeah, the two fish coming from each side. Then I just yeah.
I'll just
thought-
say too, there's a book called The Salts of Salvation. And it relates to the Zodiac. And it's really interesting because they correspond the 12 cell salts with the 12 signs. And they basically say that, you can work with these cell salts, to cure different ailments and just to kind of get into, you know, um, balance and everything within your own system. But I can't remember the cell salt name, but the property of the cell salt, what it really works well with is your blood. And so if you read the chapter on Pisces, basically they say that it really has to do with like extremities, and it has to do with kind of like they kept on making all of these metaphors to like rivers and branches and the ends of branches and the ends of the branches of the world tree and things like that, relating it to your blood vessels and
Ah,
everything
yeah.
else. And so I just think that's really interesting that that's even sort of a thing. There's a correspondence with like tubular things and meandering things and kind of river like things and extremities and your blood vessels and Pisces, wouldn't you know? But that's in the Salts of Salvation book. It's pretty interesting.
Well, when you're looking at two, anything went with two, you're sort of going into the diversity type nature, aren't you? Not the unity. So
Mm,
you're coming out of it. So yeah,
that's right. Yeah,
yeah.
yeah, no, exactly right. Good point. Right on. All right. So since we're dealing with Pisces, my general correspondence with Pisces is the Moon card of all things, which is really funny to start this off with the Moon card, you know. But what you're getting at here is the idea that between the two polarities of anything, there is this unifying aspect of it, this mercurial sort of aspect. And here it's really traditional to show the moon card with two towers, and there's always this middle way. And so when I think of the central pillar, I very much equate it to it being the middle pillar or the third pillar, but I'm also kind of flipping that in my mind now and perhaps considering it the first pillar. So whenever you see two pillars anywhere, there's an implied central pillar, which I would consider to be the world axis. This is the middle way, this is the middle point between the two polarities. And when you look at the moon card, that is like literally what it's all about. It's
Yep.
all about that middle path, you know. And so again, I think this is very mercurial and related to the world axis for sure.
Yeah, you can see it straight away. And you can say that there's the sun and the moon joined together. It's got the moon as the name of it, but it's the sun and the moon joined together by the look of
That's
that.
it.
And then you
It
have the
certainly
the
is.
trail right between it, the path right between it. So
Yeah, 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 exactly. And then notice that the two Anubis figures are actually literally holding symbols of Mercury in their hand. That's what it looks like to me, at least. It looks like they're holding little symbols of Mercury, you know. And so obviously there's lots of um, funerary sort of like rituals and stuff that Anubis corresponds with. And so this is basically showing you, I think, in many ways, kind of like the afterlife journey, the transition from, this domain to perhaps another plane or another reality. I've done presentations on this before in my Seven Gates to the Great Beyond presentation. I talk about how the moon, in some traditions, is thought of as the first gateway actually out of here. And so they say that if you're going to go, in astral travel, that working with the moon is one of the first things you want to wrap your head around, because we have an intimate relationship with the moon here on Earth. And there's groups that have corresponded the seven stars of Ursa Major with the seven planets. And what it's called star stepping. This is what these ascension sort of techniques are all about, some of them at least. And the first star or planet that you go to is actually the moon itself before you go to other planets or other stars or whatever, if that makes sense. But there is a whole afterlife journey thing with Mercury, with Anubis, with the moon itself, and with the middle way, and with the world axis. So that's kind of what I'm seeing here.
yeah, and through my research as well, like whenever sometimes you would find sun symbolism associated with Mercury, and then other times you're just like it's all lunar, and I'm like, oh, this is driving me insane because you got connections between the two, and you're just like, well, this was when I was initially trying to figure out what was going on with Mercury, um, as it related
Right,
to the battery. I'm like, what is this thing, and where does it fit? Um,
right, right, right. Yeah, exactly.
And so it had
Um,
a lot of both, the solar and the lunar symbolism baked into it, especially through numbers. When you're dealing with, say, its number is 27 for Mercury, there's 27 days in the lunar cycle. So yeah,
very,
just
very interesting.
interesting correlations like that.
Oh, definitely. The other thing I'll say is that the symbol for Pisces, it's kind of like it's two kind of like half circles and then a line through it. You can see it's pretty small there on the lower left in the Thoth card. But it to me it looks exactly like the cross section of a Taurus field. To me, it looks like you're looking at the middle portion of a Taurus field, and then the line right in the middle is like the plane that we actually live on.
Mhm.
So I think there's toroidal symbolism kind of even baked into literally Pisces itself, which I've actually last year I made a video about this. So if people go to the Pisces section in my playlists, you'll probably find it. But yeah, good stuff.
So I'd add this one in. Matsaya is literally fish. That's what it means. And I pointed it out because really it's got the same symbolism as you would see the Jesus figure within the Vesica as well. I don't know if most people have seen that, but so this Vishnu god or Vishnu is actually being born or half fish in a sense, and that's basically to do with that Pisces or the Vesica. And so it's just a symbolic way of showing something coming out of the vesica. And we'll see later that the vesica is not just like a yoni or somewhere to be born out of, but it's also related to the mouth and the eye. So
Mm,
where you see and where you speak, and so the word that comes out of your mouth, and so you will see a lot of relationship between this idea of the word
mm.
um, coming out of the vesica as well. So the symbolism relates perfectly to the geometric understanding of it, and also where it's found within us and other ideas. But yeah, so it
Sure.
relates to that first point of coming out of it's a creation story as well, coming out of the central pillar, that central motif.
Oh, nice. Yeah, yeah. I can see that. Also, too, you're just reminding me that the Vesca, the yoni almond shape, it projects, it creates, it brings things forth, and it's also receptive. And so I
Yeah.
think that's kind of another thing that I always think about too. So same thing with our eyes, they project and they receive. Our mouths
Mm.
project and they receive. It's a two-way street sort of thing. And the kind of early fish god sort of thing. There's several pantheons where the early gods of their pantheon came from fish, or they're half fish, or something along those lines. And so I know in the Vedic pantheon there were seven rishis, and I know there's fish symbolism related to them. In the Apkalu, which is like a Sumerian sort of thing, they used to wear like these fish cloak things, where they were either half fish. So yeah, that's an interesting sort of thing. And the fish itself too, I mean, when you look in symbolism books, you're going to see feminine symbolism and phallic symbolism. And so I think that's really interesting. When I was looking through some of my resources regarding the fish, um, some saying that it's definitely heavily feminine, and some saying that it's very, very phallic. And I
So
think it's both.
yeah.
Yeah.
So the other thing, like this, Matsaya is described as rescued the first man or Manu from the Great Deluge, and I found that really interesting. And thinking about it today, and putting the concept of waters, mothers, and matrix,
Mm.
it seems to be a poetic way of saying, um, this the mind out of matter. So this God brought reason out of the matrix, if you like, or the mother. So
Ah.
rescuing from a deluge is to bring out of the sea, in a sense.
Oh, that's
So
interesting.
so it's an order out of chaos type scenario once again.
Right, right. There's another Vedic myth. I'm gonna space on the names here, but it's essentially it's a central pillar breaking, and then this lion-headed figure comes out of the pillar. And it's kind of the same sort of thing, and they bring order to the situation.
Mhm.
And so there's lots of old paintings where you can see one pillar and it's literally split, and this lion comes out of it, which is more of a masculine sort of thing, if you want to
Yeah.
look at it that way. Solar symbolism, but it very much reminds me of exactly what you just said. That's fascinating, dude.
Yeah, and there's also a massive connection between these mercurial gods and civilization. Yeah, and as you know, the pole and polis is a city, and those sort of things. So these are actually bringing order and civilization to the world. Whether it be Thoth bringing agriculture or whatever it is, these gods always bring that the logic to understand how to go about a process.
Yeah, no, absolutely. That makes sense, certainly, for sure. Nice. All right, the arc is a cube.
Okay. Um, I don't know if I can see that well enough to read it. Are you able to read that, or you want me to bring it up on my iPad?
I can read it. There might be a couple of words here that I'm not gonna land correctly, but
Just say Noah.
in the Sumerian myth of Noah, we are told that uh, the first ark was a cube measuring 60 by 60 by 60 fathoms, which represents the unit in sexagesimal system where 60 is written as 1. Oh, that's interesting. In one Old Testament, these elements are repeated when we learn that Noah's Ark was also a cube, whose landing symbolized the end of the Great Flood. In Jewish legends, it is said that since the ark disappeared, there was a stone in its place, which was called the foundation stone, and it is said to lie above the waters that are below the Holy of Holies. In Mecca, the navel of the Islam faith, there stands the holy stone of the Kaaba, which is also a cube, and we are told that even Christ is compared to a cube shaped mountain.
So, out of this, you're following the geometric form here of the vesica, and then you follow it to create the seed of life. And out of the seed of life, you automatically start to build the cube shape um, from it. And when you do that, that's where I think a lot of these references are from. And obviously, when they're measuring a cube of 60, 60, 60, it's a reference to 666.
Mm,
And those sort of ideas as well, which are related to music and harmony, actually, because 666 is the perfect fifth in music. So this is where we're starting to see harmonics emerge, and we'll see that the father and the mother are related to um, this these geometric shapes of patterns, um,
mm,
and it has a lot to do with the mind as well. And this is also, in a sense, the birth of space, because you have the directions are born. Um, so you'll have the 8 directions, or what have you, or you'll have the 4 directions, and then you'll have an up and down direction. And so again, we are, or the Vishnu character, or the Jesus character, or whatever mercurial character you want to put in it, is actually the seventh point of the
mm,
cube. So it's the internal point from which the cube is born. So it is the
mm.
center of the cube, and then it can go any direction from that. Um,
Right.
so yeah,
Yeah. That's reminding me of a few things. One, if you take a standard, Star of David Jewish star, if you connect the tips, it makes a cube, and so it makes a hexagon, which obviously is just basically the silhouette of a cube, and so the Jewish star is composed of two triangles, basically, one upright and the one pointing downward. The perfect triangle, each corner is 60 degrees, right? 60, 60,
right.
60, 180. And so I don't know, there's kind of an interesting pattern kind of going on with that. I think so. It's just reminding me of the angles of a perfect triangle. And so that would
Yep.
fit snugly within this cube, two of them, one pointed up and one pointed down.
Yeah, exactly. It does. Yep. That's the seal of Solomon as well, which is Solomon seems to be 2 words. I could be wrong, but it's joining of the soul and the moon. So the sun, both of them
Oh.
together. Um, so yeah,
I like that a lot, dude. I always hear the soul of man sort of thing. And actually,
mm,
those are related too, because my understanding is that man, a lot of words that are man, I'm min, etc., come from the moon.
mm.
And so soul and mon, moon, to me that makes a lot of sense, that it's actually the sun and moon combined. And that also makes a lot of sense too, because in front of Solomon's temple, you have those twin pillars right there, the solar and the lunar pole.
The other way of looking at it is like soul as in foot, and then mon as in one. So 1 foot. And
Uh,
so that's
ah,
another interesting way of looking at it, which would be, and you could go into the 1 foot symbolism, which is,
oh yeah.
yeah, huge,
No, no, no,
standing on one
absolutely.
foot. Yeah.
For sure, for sure. Right on.
So this cube is really the omphalos stone, or the foundation stone of the world.
Mm,
So it has a lot of references to that. And I just pointed out that it has a trinity in it, or the Y, which
mhm.
is related to Yod. The number I, the I letter I is equal to 10, and those sort of things. So it has, these other correlations that is a whole weave on
Wow.
itself,
Right.
um, and the 3 feet. You see the symbol as well,
Yeah.
which is just another reference to the Trinity.
Got it, got it. Yeah, it reminds me, it's a very mercurial symbol. The wings on the feet, and then, Mercury being the messenger of the gods, related to travel, everything else. And then regarding Yod, that's said to be the first letter in Hebrew. It's like the spark that creates all the other letters. It's the smallest letter, and it kinda
Right.
looks like a little flame sort of thing. So that's interesting too, which fits nicely with what you're saying. And I just have to say, if people follow our community, like on Interverse and things like that, arc symbolism is a thing right now. I feel like it wants to be discussed. So the arc being like this seed sort of thing of creation, from which everything kind of comes from. Very fascinating stuff. And then you've got the capstone here.
Yeah, well, out of these geometric circles, and it's not necessarily the seed, but just a portion of it,
Hmm.
you're starting to get other symbols that the sort of we know fairly well, whether it be put into movies or whatever, but you've got like the image of the Holy Grail starts to come out. Um, and you also produce the capstone because it has 4 triangles that can be produced, and so that builds a pyramid. You have the eye of providence, the all-seeing eye. When they all these famous people do the eye sort of symbolism.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, that's based on this geometry. That's how you produce that eye. And that little shape within the triangle is called a lens. So it's directly linked to the eye.
Mm.
Um, you also have a different sort of eye, and this one you see in Hindu sort of stuff, and it's the eye is upright rather than sort of normally.
Mm.
Uh, and you can just see I've highlighted it there in blue, and I just found that
Uh,
fascinating. I could make that correlation between the upright eye, and this also could have some correlation to what are they called? The Cyclops in
mm.
mythology, which are part of the Titans. You know,
Right, right, right. Oh man, that's really interesting. Good stuff. I have never seen this sort of breakdown before with these symbols until you introduced it to me. But even outside of what you put together here, I think this just kind of further adds to the conversation. These are all northern sacred center symbols anyway.
yeah,
So recently in a video, the fleur de lis, if you look at old compass roses or compasses, north is indicated with the fleur de lis. And there's a few different reasons for that, that I might unpack at some point. And then, the Holy Grail too. I just think that when people are looking for some of these ancient relics, they're looking for metaphors. So good luck with that. There may
yeah.
have been an actual Holy Grail at some point. I don't know. That's a whole thing, the Holy Grail mythos and all of that. But I think we're talking about a Holy Grail that exists at the center of everything, sort of thing. It's symbolic,
It's
you
a cup
know.
of life. Yeah,
Yeah, yeah, exactly
yeah.
right, So there's, associations with the Holy Grail and kinda like the Fountain of Youth and things like that, and, that's something that I might get into at some point. And then I'm already, of the opinion that, the all-seeing eye or eye of providence is another sacred center sort of symbol
Oh
as
yeah,
well,
it definitely is. Yeah,
right? And so Polaris could be like the eye of God, the eye in the sky, things like that. And that's probably going to be my next video that I actually edit and produce and everything, is going to be the all-seeing eye and how it's related to Polaris, which is why in some Freemasonic artwork, like I was saying earlier, you have 3 pillars. One is lunar, one is solar, and the middle one oftentimes has the eye of providence literally on top of the pillar itself, in on top of the middle pillar. So they're even saying that the Ionic pillar is related to, in my opinion, Polaris and the Eye of Providence. This true point of ascension, the world axis. Um, yeah, so this is a very interesting, other interpretation of everything.
Yeah, and then you have the capstone, which is the Ben stone, the top of the pyramid, and the same thing. So it's got the eye of providence is the omnipresent eye, and that's what Polaris is. The dot on top of the eye itself, the letter.
That's right.
Um, so yeah, these are all 100%. That's what they're referencing. The Trinity, the eye. Yeah.
Yep. Yeah, yeah. I hear you loud
And
and
for
clear.
us, there is lots of reference to this spring in the top of the head as well,
Mhm.
in relation to the fountain of youth, which a lot of these mercurial gods are actually um, sort of young gods in a sense that they never grow old, and so that's the reference to that timelessness. They're sort of in a state of perfection, if you like, always in their youth.
Mhm.
But the spring at the top of the head is related to the fontanelle in us,
Mm.
which fontanelle actually means spring. So it's that soft bit at the top of the head there, and for meditation practices, there's a lot associated with leaving the body at death through that portal or opening it up, which is interesting to make the analogy between the north and ourselves and the gate.
That's right. And the fountain or the spring too just reminds me of the top of a Taurus field, right?
Yeah.
As well. So, yeah, good stuff. So now we have the pomegranate.
Yeah. Well, you want to go into the high priestess? Do you want to?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting because very similar symbolism, different, but as the moon card, So here you have this middle way. You have the Boaz and Jacqueline pillars, so this duality, polarity sort of thing, and she's right there in the middle. She's holding the Torah scroll, and then the pomegranates in the back, right, are laid out exactly like the tree of life that you see on the left hand side there. And then, as just to connect it further to the moon card, you have the crescent moon at her feet, which is kind of a common thing that you'll see with the Virgin Mary and everything else. And it's my understanding too that essentially the pomegranate. Some people believe that the pomegranate was actually the forbidden fruit,
Hmm.
and so that's kind of a curious sort of thing as well. Um, but yeah, so I think that basically she is this middle way, the gateway through, the path through, and she's a woman, so she has the ability to birth life and everything else. And woman, the womb, it's the ultimate gateway here too.
Mhm. Yeah, I sort of highlighted in this picture. To me, she represents Persephone. So she's usually associated with spring, the birth of new life, and those sort of things, flowers.
Hmm.
Um, but I highlighted that yod in the pomegranate too, which I thought was interesting that that should be there. But yeah, it's to me, she's sort of more represents the Pisces, but these are to me, like we've spoken about, are all northern type aspects anyway. So she has the Torah in her hand, which is the rota, which is the turning of the cosmos, and a lot of the times we won't be able to distinguish the female Mercury version and the masculine Mercury version, or the father is the son and the mother is also the sort of daughter in a sense. So you can't really distinguish between the two. Sometimes they'll be in older forms and sometimes they'll be in younger forms. But because the Trinity is the way it is, it's a unity. And so when you're dealing with the feminine, you're also dealing with the masculine and you're also dealing with the product of them. Um, so this simply it's the mother, the father, and the child. And the child is a product of the mother and father. It's the joining of the two. So
Right, right.
um,
And then also too, just to kind of add to what you're saying here and what you said earlier, but the further you look into masculine symbolism, you're going to find the feminine. The further you look into feminine symbolism, you're going to find the masculine. And so that's just kind of the deal. And the tarot is actually a really, really good example of this because the signs that correspond with certain cards are, it might be masculine, but the artwork is feminine. Or the sign might be feminine, but the artwork is masculine, something along those lines. And so I also just want to point out, since you have the tree of life here on the left hand side, the Kabbalistic tree of life, notice that the whole breakdown of it is that it's three pillars. There's the left pillar, there's the right pillar, and then there's that central pillar. Notice that that central pillar goes above and below the other two pillars. So with the high priestess card, you see the two pillars on the sides, but there's this implied central pillar that goes beyond the other pillars, so it's more of an ascended sort of thing. It goes above and below the other two, which to me is just emblematic of the world axis and this Ionic pillar business that we're talking about here. So just thought I would point that out since we have a visual. Nice.
Brilliant. I just wanted to point out again, when we're dealing with the Vesica, we're dealing with sort of the ship. And the ship is a really perfect metaphor, and this is where you could go into your law stuff or all that sort of thing, but again, we're dealing with water and wind, so a vessel is dictated to by the water and by the wind, so by the mind and by the material. And so it is this sort of junction spot, this traveling junction between those two polarities where it sort of operates, if you like. And it also has the shape of the Vesica, and it also has the pillar, the central mast that's within it. So it has a really nice metaphor for that, and also like to do with the sea and fish and all that sort of stuff as well.
That's right. That's right. Yeah, and related to the arc, I said earlier that the arc is related to the seed and to like germination and fertility and like growth and things like that. And the Vesca just looks like a seed. That ship within it, it just looks like a seed from the top down as well.
Hmm.
So arc
Yeah.
symbolism kind of like through and through with what it represents. But yeah, good stuff.
Yeah, that's basically it I had for that. But yeah.
Right on. And do you want me to read this one?
I can bring it up.
Okay.
Sorry.
And thank you guys, no worries, for hanging out if you're watching us live.
In Greek mythology, the so-called robe or veil woven by Harmonia was in reference to the geometrical design type. It is a fishnet, for the entire pattern is governed by the cube root of 3, which in the realm of geometry springs from the Vesica Pisces, the vessel of the fish. To the early Christian Gnostics, the net was an important cosmological symbol, but this natural symbolism predates Christianity and represents the woven web of nature, or the vilifying power of harmony, which enforces the pattern of the creation. The Orphics possess books entitled The Net and the Veil and the Omphalos Stone in the Temple of Apollo at Delphi. Was covered with a netting pattern. The Omphalos Stone at the Temple of Apollo was covered with the netting pattern. In the language of the ancient mysticism, to unravel the veil is to discover the weaver. So, of course, we have, fish type symbology here, but also you got the weaving type symbology as well, relating to the fates that weave, or spiders and those type of things. This idea of, like in our modern sort of cosmologies, if you like, the Spider-Man is a version of that mercurial character that weaves the webs, and holds order together. So just it keeps going on and on, but it's in our modern stuff as well.
Right. No, exactly. Yeah, the Omphale stone is so fascinating. When I first came across this reference, I just was really, really intrigued, being this navel of the world sort of thing, the sacred center. And then also regarding the veil too, there's lots of veil symbolism with Virgo, who's the queen of heaven, who
Mm.
actually has like a Vesica Pisces in her symbol. It sometimes, it's like an M with like a fish sort of
Oh,
thing,
yeah.
and so it's very much related. But the idea is that deep within her, veiled within her, is her creation, her child, her solar child, which I would equate to, when you're thinking of things through the astrological lens, is actually Leo, which is why they're right next to each other. And we'll get
Mhm.
into it in one of the cards, in the strength card. You see a woman who is basically an expression of Virgo, and she's taming the beast that is the lion. So when you look at the strength card, the traditional version, you are looking at a symbolic reference to the relationship between Virgo and Leo, in my opinion. And so
Yeah.
I can't not think of veil symbolism with Virgo. It's also a V as well. And there's this idea too that there are veils between domains and between realities and stuff. So I know, like in Islam, I believe there's I don't know what text it's from, but it's something like there's 70,000 veils between us and God, or something
Yeah.
along those
Okay.
lines. So veil symbolism is super fascinating, but the fact that there's even a seven in there, 70,000, I think is really intriguing,
Yeah.
for a lot of different reasons.
So yeah, it's to do with that flower of life, basically the seed of life. That's the veil that covers the Omphale stone. So
Right, right.
yeah, yeah,
No, I love
and,
it.
and it's the veil, as we saw before. It was that net that actually created the cube.
Ah, oh, I
So
see.
so
Sure.
the net actually produces that cubic shape and produces the space
Right, right, right.
that
No,
we
makes
operate
sense.
in, three-dimensional space. Yeah.
Sure, sure. Awesome. All right. So I believe this introduces us to the next sign, which is Pisces, or sorry, Aries, correct? For
Hmm.
the Emperor. Yeah. So I mean, I just made a Instagram post about this, but it looks to me like the Emperor is the central mountain. So he's the world mountain, which connects him to the world axis. And so I think that that's what's going on here. He's throned, and his throne is made out of stone. So to me, this just kind of like really solidifies this idea that he is the mountain, that there is this stability here. You're dealing with the number four. So number four symbolism has a lot to do with foundations, has a lot to do with directions, or the four corners of Earth. And then the cube, obviously, it's made up of squares, you know. And then also too, there's other emperor cards where he's literally holding a scepter, and at the end of the scepter is the fleur de lis, like we talked about earlier, which is a northern symbol. Um, adding to all of that too, he corresponds with Aries. That's why we're talking about it. But rams are known for their climbing ability and living at higher elevations. So I think that's kind of interesting. And there's a
Yeah, they
lot of
climb the mountain. Yeah.
yeah, 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 exactly. There's a lot of stuff with Aries too, which implies a sacred center, or the things from which everything emanates from, So I very much see like a sacrificial sort of sacred center kind of thing with Aries. And then even just the symbol for Aries itself, it's like the monad splitting off into two, so it's the one becoming two. It looks like the top of a Taurus field and everything else. But I think ultimately, yeah, there's just a lot of northern sort of sacred center polar stuff going on here. That's what I see.
His scepter is interesting too. It's got like the T with the circle on top.
Yeah.
It reminds me of the Ankh as well, the Egyptian
Hmm.
Ankh, and the T is related to seven as well. So
Okay.
yeah,
Nice.
it's all over it. And Aries arise is to do with the head as well. So
Right.
it's that idea of coming out of the fish as well, like the mind out of matter. The symbology again is there.
Oh, definitely. And then when I see this particular scepter here, it kind of looks a little bit like the symbol for Venus. which
Ah,
kind of goes back to what I was saying earlier. When you look into masculine symbolism, you're going to find the feminine and vice versa. And so, to me, when I look at the court cards, right, the pages and all of the court cards, I think they all revolve around the queen. Personally, I think that's kind
mm.
of like the deal. So, where would the emperor be without his queen? But yeah, I think he's kind of like a central mountain, like Mount Meru or something like that.
Well, that idea is similar to Apollo with the muses, and where you have that central Apollo, the pole, and then you
Mhm.
have the muses, and it's really relating to the maypole that we saw at the beginning as well, where the women are dancing around that central pole.
Right. Yeah,
Um,
exactly. And also, too, as I said earlier, that central axis, the world axis, is believed symbolically it represents order. It brings order to a situation. This is what a good emperor would do. He would bring order to, his community or his village or whatever. And so he has authority. And we've kind of talked about this a little bit, but there's a whole line of thinking that suggests that there were groups back in the day where they considered like the ultimate law and authority to come from that central axis, essentially. And
yep.
so the order it brought to the universe is the order it brings, to your life or whatever. And a paternal patriarchal figure like this would do the same thing. He would bring order to the chaos, if he's doing things the right way.
Well, we still see sort of some of the symbolism even with the judges, and they have the horse hair on the top
Yeah.
of their head. So they're relating to the horse, which is relating to divine order. They have the hammer in their hand, which is the sky god, and all those sort of things. So yeah,
Right.
they're meant to symbolize that central pillar and the order,
Hmm.
hundred
Hmm.
percent.
Yeah, no, I agree with you for sure. All right.
So in relation to this Aries, the reason I bring this up is because I don't know if I got these out of order, but there is the same sort of that Ionic pillar has the same sort of symbolic motif as the Aries symbol. And so you can see the twirling on each side, the horns on each side of it.
Mm.
And on the Ionic pillar, usually in Masonic drawing boards or what have you, they'll have the three pillars, which is the Doric, the Ionic, and the Corinthian.
Mhm.
The central pillar is the Ionic, and you just need to change the I to a Y, and you got the Ionic.
Mm.
So it is the Ionic pillar in a sense. Um, and so this rabbit hole goes really deep in regards to the three hori and those sort of things and relating to horses and whatnot. But um, ionic is another term in science, or ionic bonding is this exchange or a chemical bonding that is between two opposite charged particles. And so this is the same sort of idea as the vesica in a sense that it has the masculine and feminine, and they come together
Mm.
and bond. Um, in some ways, it's sexual intercourse as well.
Sure.
So that's where you get some of this, and all in these as well is also measurement systems for
Mm.
building and those sort of things, which is extremely related to not just the geometry, but what comes out of that geometry is the measurement systems. And that's, you do actually see this idea of weights and measures come up a lot. And
Mm.
that's to do with, weight is nearly always to do with the mother as well, being heavy. She bears the burden, bears the
Mm.
child, and those sort of things.
Mm.
She's all to do with the density of matter, and then you have the actual rule, or those sort of things are to do with the mind as well. So weights and measures are a sort of like this holding the two. Is you are becoming that mercurial figure in a sense. Um,
Right, right.
yeah.
Excellent. I love it, man. Also, because it's right here, these are the three pillars that I've referred to with solar and then lunar, and then right in the middle with the all-seeing eye, the Ionic pillar, the transcendent pillar, the world axis. And then I'm glad you put the mercurial symbol right there too.
Yep.
Um, Last thing I'll say, just real quick, just because it came to me regarding the emperor and how it relates to Aries, I'm of the opinion that Aries and Aryan are related in that there's a northern connection between both of those words. And so I think people who might identify as Aryans, which there's Aryans all over the world. I've mentioned this several times before, but there's the northern European Aryans, and then there's Vedic Aryans from India. And it's very interesting that there are people who identify as being Aryan, but oftentimes what you'll find is that their homeland is in the Arctic AR. And
Yeah.
so I think there's kind of all of this stuff kind of going on there. It's all northern stuff,
Yep.
in my opinion. So just wanted to point that out real quick.
In the air. So air, mind.
Oh, nice. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Right on. Okay.
Yeah. So the older form of the Ionic pillar is this Aeolic, and it actually means of the wind.
Mm,
So of the mind. You can just flip the W to an M, and it refers to the action and power of the wind. And
mm,
so I think that's where you would get the idea of the Ionian pillar.
mm,
So and this is like this form for the glyph of Aries is actually how you produce phi out of the vesica. So I just found that very interesting as well, because as
mm.
phi is related to um, the golden ratio and golden means and law and those sort of things as well. Um,
Right.
but the horn symbolism, um, no, it just goes on and on and on, and we'll get into that as we go along. But it's just crazy, the horn
Yeah.
symbolism, which is a representative of the horn is basically the pillar symbolism again in itself, and it
Right.
also has to do with sound, the word producing sound, vibration, those sort of things that come into play with it. Um,
Right. Absolutely. And I'll point this out. This is a deep cut kind of pun, definitely intended. But because you have it here, this stone where it looks very much like Aries, right? The symbol for Aries. The circumcision tools that the Jewish tribe uses, it looks almost exactly like that. It looks like a symbol for Aries, actually. And so this gets into symbolism relating to the lamb and the ram being sacrificed, and then circumcision being kind of like a sacrificial act. And there's
mm.
various storylines and folklore that very much relates all of these things together. And so I might get into that at some point. I lightly brought it up in my magician's wand sort of thing, my magician's wand presentation. But there's Aries symbolism related to circumcision and sacrifice, Judaism, and a bunch of other stuff. So I
With that, when you're dealing with those sacrifices and those sort of things, I just want to clarify for the way I see it, at least,
sure.
is that n- they're basically taking things that shouldn't be literal and taking them literally, and then acting them out in a literal form. And this is a lot of the problems we see with any of these cults, in a sense, is that they misunderstand what it actually means internally, and then they objectify it externally and do things that are uh, not good, in my opinion.
Not necessary.
Yeah, not necessary.
Yeah, man, for sure. No, I hear you loud and clear with that.
Yeah.
All right.
Okay, so we're getting into some of the lamb symbolism, which Jesus is the shepherd, and same with Hermes or Mercury. They're all sort of related to the good shepherd.
Mm.
Um, and this really breaks down and comes from Gematria, and especially the Greek Gematria, where lamb is actually has a value of 361.
Mm,
Um, so what this is, the 361 is a reference to the monad symbol, as you see there, the circle with the point in it, because it has 360 degrees for the whole circle, and then you have one point in the center.
mm, right.
And so the
Oh.
lamb, when they hold that lamb over their shoulders as symbolic there, what they're actually doing is saying, this Hermes holds the world above his head, he's
Mm,
holding the sky, and is this exact same symbolism as Atlas,
mm,
who was holding the sky above his head. That's exactly what the world pillar does.
mm,
It separates the lower and the upper. And
mm,
so this is where you get this. And also the child is related to this as well, 361. So this is where a lot of this symbolism comes from. It goes a lot deeper than that. I might just see if I can share screen for a second because I've got a bigger. Um,
sure. So let me know if it allows you on your end or if I need to give you permissions or something.
yeah, I've got it there, but you should be able to pull it up in a sec.
Got it.
Yeah.
Good to go?
Yep.
Cool.
So this is one that I did, but was actually is a bigger version of it, and it's just because
Oh,
I've kept finding more information actually. But when you're dealing with the lamb, you're dealing with what they used to do was put oil on the lamb's head, the good shepherds would, and that would actually protect the lamb from getting these types of flies or insects, and they'd lay eggs into the lamb's eyes and things like that,
mm,
and would end up killing it. So the olive oil anointing the lamb it was a real practice to help the survivability of the lamb. And so you have this symbology that's associated with oil and lamb and these sort of things. So the Christ is the oil, and I
mhm,
think this is where we're getting some of this. These ancient practices, they're seeing them just like the threshing floor. They're seeing them in a spiritual light as well. But oil has a huge amount of references as well. We'll probably get into that a bit later, but also um, with this monad, you're actually seeing that it represents an eye,
mm,
and the center piece of that eye is our pupil. And if you do the Greek gematria for pupil, you'll actually get 566, which is a massive reference to the IHS, which is the Jesus sort of first letters, first three Greek letters of the Jesus name in Greek. And so you'll get this symbol that's used. I think it's really a Jesuit symbol
mm,
nowadays,
right.
but you can see that the IHS in that picture down below is within the vesica, and is detailing an eye and those sort of things. But it just all these sort of things relate to each other in a very specific way. Is my point?
Right, right. Very interesting. There's a lot to talk about with this slide, man. There's so much going on here. But I will be I'll use discretion here. So the Atlas Hermes connection I think is really interesting. I had not considered that, but you may already be aware of this, but in a lot of older depictions of Atlas, he's actually literally holding up the firmament. He's not holding up a sphere, but he's holding up the vault of
Yep.
heaven, and I think that's just really fascinating. I've also seen illustrations of Atlas holding up the heavens, and he's like clearly at the northern portion of Earth too,
Mm,
very much identifying him with the world axis. And then, kind of what I was saying earlier regarding Aries and sacrifice, Jesus was crucified, you know,
mm,
and Saturn eats his children, and there are depictions of Saturn chopping off the legs of Hermes with a scythe, which I
Oh, yeah.
believe is basically kind of saying the same thing as where like the old eat the young sort of thing. And so symbolically, and so they feed off of the young. And so kind of adding to your point regarding Hermes being younger, that's kind of the thing, is that his youth is kind of in contrast to Saturn's age and his experience and everything. So there's definitely that going on there. But it looks like you have something.
Yeah, with that, you do see that same sort of operation happening between, say, it's the daughter of Demeter,
Mm,
and so you have the older aspect who would sort of relate to the older part of the season and the newer part of the season.
mm,
So they're sort of mother and daughter in a sense, but they're the same being at the same time,
mm,
because the Persephone is Demeter and Demeter is Persephone, and this would be the same with Saturn, because Saturn is Mercury in a sense. You know, it's a Time
mm,
Lord, the Time Lords, um, and the other one is the season. In a sense, to eat your own children is the cycle of the year in a sense, or
mm.
the idea of um, the winter bringing everything back into itself and then producing again. So it's acting as it eats its own sort of progeny in a sense. It's eating the last of the spring as it's growing up and getting old. It eats it again, and it's
There
our
you go.
life cycle in a sense as well, because um, you know
That's right.
it's a constant movement. Yeah.
100%. No, I see exactly what you're saying. No, you're spot on with that as well. Um, the other thing I'll say regarding Aries and sacrifice is the idea that Aries is a fire sign and it's ruled by Mars, the god of war, the planet of war. What is war?
Mm.
It's a sacrificial sort of thing. What does fire need to burn? It needs something to burn. There needs to be something that's symbolically sacrificed in order for this fire to actually, spread and multiply and everything else. And so it's interesting that most people look at Aries as the beginning of the Zodiac year, of the astrological year. And it kind of just represents almost like this explosive sort of energy. Because I believe I'm losing all my words because I'm not doing astrology as much. If it's not mutable and it's not fixed, it is
Cardinal, is it?
cardinal. It's a cardinal fire sign, I believe, right? And so there is more of like this raw explosive sort of thing going on there. So it's almost like the kickstart of the year, that you need something to kind of like go and take charge in order for the whole entire system to actually kind of like function, I guess. It's kind of the way I look at it.
Yeah,
Sometimes it's
that's
referred
really
to as.
interesting.
Go ahead.
Because a lot of, and if you read of some of the sort of practices of small villages, and there was one in particular I read, it was about the Himalayans, and sort of no one had been there to sort of work out what they were doing, but they would have all these practices that would separate the masculine for the feminine, and then they'd bring them back together
Mm,
eventually, and it would be sort of like this big build up, right? And that build up of the two energies would then generate the rest of the year, the productivity of
mm,
the rest of the year. And so when you're talking about fire and friction, you're talking about the two polarities moving together. You're basically talking about sexual intercourse and the
mhm,
production of life. So when I think of those fire signs now, yeah, and the fire as what ignited the universe, and they'll actually directly reference this type of idea, is it's that desire really seeded the universe in a sense. It
mm.
was the two polarities coming together
That's
in an
right.
act of love or desire that actually produced the world.
That's right.
And so there's like a lot of references to the horse, um, and the eagle, and all these sort of references to the mind and matter coming together to produce life. And we still have it in some terms, just in a sort of a crass way, and not a very nice way, in modern sort of cosmology, where they have the Big Bang. the big fuck. That's what I call it. But
That's hilarious. Yeah, no, I think of tension and just like symbolically what tension represents. So you get a rubber band and you have two ends of the rubber band, the polarity, you pull, 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 pull. There's tension. It wants to snap back together,
yeah,
and so that seems to be kind of the thing is that all was one, and then this separation created tension between things that wanted to reunify, and it seems
mhm,
to be the thing that all that happens here is things come together and they break apart. But that tension, though, I mean, we refer to it as sexual tension, right? And so
mm.
basically, to your point, everything you're saying, I totally understand and am down with. Very cool, man. This was a really, really fruitful slide here. So it gets my mind thinking about all sorts of things. Right.
So this goes into it a little bit deeper in regards to the tree of life and
Hmm.
its relationship to the olive tree. And you can see the olive is, basically just another tree of life. And um, it's interesting that the number in Greek gematria for the olive tree is 37. And then you have this basically flower of life or tree of life that is produced from the net of harmonia, and
Mm.
that has 37 intersections. So
Wow.
when you're dealing with oil, the production of oil, there seems to be this direct analogy, and it's like the one we've all heard, which is turning lead to gold, right? Well, it's the same sort of analogy. The olive comes off the tree, is beaten off the tree, and then it then goes through a process to be turned into oil and refined, and then it turns into a lamp oil or an oil for anointing the lamb, or all these other
Hmm.
things for cooking, for food and those sort of things as well. But the process for making it is very similar to um, the horses moving around the threshing floor.
Mm.
And so this is a picture of a donkey here, and it's in charge of this mill, and the millstone, or this adder stone, as sometimes it's called. And so it's this grinding that's in a lot of sort of older mythologies. The millstone um, is in relation to the turning of the world axis
Hmm.
again.
Hmm.
Um, and so the crushing of the olives, and then it's the refinement with the virgin stones, and then it turns into a light, which is the light of the world in a sense. So this is where if you're the analogy for the olive, then you come from the tree of life. You're sort of born into the world of change. You go through this um, process, and then you refined yourself into a lamp oil, a light
Hmm.
of the world. And so you're turning yourself from lead into gold. So this seems to be part of the Jesus story, and those sort of things as well.
Yep. Yeah, I was just gonna say that. Absolutely. Jesus was known as the Lamb of God, right?
Yeah.
Obviously. Um, and also too, it reminds me of the fact that lamp is an anagram for palm, and I relate this
Oh,
very much to the hermit card, which corresponds with Yod, and the traditional correspondence for Yod is hand. And in the hermit card, you actually literally have the hermit holding his own light. He's holding
mhm,
his own lamp, which is arguably fueled with oil. And then back to the Jesus thing, real quick. He's also known as the branch. And if there's any branch that he would be related to, it's probably either one of two things, either the palm branch
yeah,
or the olive branch,
yeah.
I would say. And in my opinion, dude, I don't know if I've ever expressed this to you, but when I look at the hermit card now, we're gonna see some images at some point. I think it's just like an older depiction of Christ, actually. It's the same
Yeah,
symbolism.
yeah,
You're
yeah.
looking at an older version of Jesus, that's kind of what I see. And the card corresponds with Virgo as well, which is opposite Pisces. Virgo, the Queen of Heaven, the Virgin Mary,
Mhm,
things like that.
mhm.
So yeah, all your points are well taken, man. For
Yep,
sure.
perfect.
Cool.
Um, is sort of still stuck on the Aries stuff because there's so much to get into with it.
Oh God,
But
yeah.
the cornucopia, the horn of plenty, this is to do with horns again, and we'll go into that how that relates to Capricorn. But the copia or the cope in the copia is the kappa or the cloak, and used figuratively for the cloak of the night's darkness, which was extended to the vault of the sky. So, in essence, the horn is a symbol for that central pillar.
Mm,
Or if you've got the two horns on either side, then you're the central pillar in it. So, but the horn is a phallic symbol again, and is that world pillar, and it's the horn of plenty because that pillar that it produces the seed, which is the seed of life, and all the rest of it. So
right.
another reference, because these a lot of the depictions of the gods not necessarily holding the cornucopia or those or having horns, but they'll have a musical instrument, or um, in a lot of the Hindu gods they'll be holding the conch,
Hmm.
um, which is another type of horn, basically, in relation to the horn as a wind instrument, an instrument of the mind.
Mm,
Then this starts to play in, and you can see the breakdown of conch is 108, and is a sacred emblem of the Hindu god Vishnu, which we said is the one out of the fish. When blown, the sound heard from the conch shell is said to be symbolic of the sacred Om sound,
mm.
and Vishnu holds it in his left hand and is the god of sound. So, sound again, you're looking at the idea of word or logos, and logos is related to logic, reasoning. So it's again this sound word coming out of matter, um, and it's the order out of chaos once again. Yeah.
Gotcha, gotcha. Makes sense. And also too, the central, the world axis, in particular, the opening that the world axis corresponds with has been referred to as the horn, as of a great bull. So horn symbolism, as you're saying, world axis symbolism, I think it's absolutely it's there. And it's kind of curious too that the bull comes right after Aries. Taurus comes right after Aries as well.
There's also a relationship between the horn, and the hippocampus, which also
Mm,
relates to the seahorse. But it's these parts of the brain that is actually to do with memory,
mm.
and also understanding spatial sort of stuff as well. So it does have this. That's a sort of a deeper sort of um, area to look into. That
Okay.
there is a correspondence within the brain as well, just like people talk about the pineal. Well, the horn is part of the hippocampus.
Right, right. Gotcha. Right on. Okay, so here we are at Taurus, and so one of the things that I mentioned to Lucas earlier is that we're going to go for 2 hours today, and I think it makes a lot of sense. I'm glad we actually decided to do that because this would be a really long presentation just in one go. But we're going to split this up into two different sections, and so consider this part one, and then we will do part two. Lucas, do you think we should proceed with Taurus right now, or do you think this would be a good place to stop? Or we could stop right before Gemini too, whatever you think makes sense.
Yeah, let's get up to Gemini.
Okay,
Yeah,
let's do it.
let's do it.
Cool, cool.
I'm happy.
Right on. So here we are, Taurus, the bull.
Yep. So bull symbolism, like Aries, is just huge. Um, a lot of it's to do with the sky gods,
Hmm.
and yeah, they'll be related to the bull. But you also have the female version of that, which is the bull of heaven. Um, yeah, so I corresponded to the emperors, but and it's just why I've originally done the tarot cards. I think you have a different correspondence. Is that correct?
I do. I tend to correspond it right with the hierophant, but you're not wrong by corresponding it with the Empress too. I'll just say, the Venus symbol is right there. Taurus is ruled by Venus, and I've long thought too that it's my understanding that I think Taurus was maybe referred to as a cow before it was referred to as a bull. And so obviously the bull implies the masculinity and more of the aggressive sort of nature of the bull. It's usually depicted kind of like this big tough sort of bull oftentimes, but I sometimes wonder if actually just referring to it as a cow makes more sense.
Yeah, well, the cow was, highly significant for fertility, wasn't it? Using their
Yeah,
manure, and then, it's still revered now in India, and it's the sacred cow. Um,
that's
and
right.
it is it's regarded as basically the queen of heaven, which is the feminine side of that mercurial figure, and it's um, yeah, any of those feminine gods basically can be brought back to these singular feminine sort of aspects. It's just aspects of the same singular feminine
Mhm.
archetype. Yeah.
Right, right. Yeah, no, exactly.
And the bull is more to do with like this notion of power as well. Just like the horse is the idea of, and it's not necessarily the bull, it could be the ox as well, but
Yeah.
it's the turning, the power behind the turning of the cosmos,
Mm,
or the turning of time. And so, this is a Akkadian on the left hand side here is an Akkadian god. I think it's Akkadian anyway. Um, and it's Hadad or Hadad, and it's Nelly. There's you could write a list as long as just go on for ages on the amount of sky gods there are, and all the same sort of symbolism. And it's basically they control the weather, the
mhm,
hurricanes, the storms, the thunder, the rain, and they have the symbolism of that. And it's essentially it's the mind, this idea of the upper space, the wind and the mind aspect.
mhm.
And you can see he's got the four horns, which are sort of like the four directions and those sort of things. But yeah,
Nice. Yeah, one thing I just wanted to point out too is he's holding a little hatchet or axe, right, in his right hand. And I just think it's fascinating that I relate the tree, basically any tree, to the world tree, and therefore the world axis as well. And what do we use to chop down a tree? We use an axe, as in like axis,
yeah,
right? And so I think that's kind of a curious little detail there. And then I always love looking at the depictions of Nut or Nut, Nuit, the sky goddess, and just kind of it's so perfect. It's emblematic, especially here, the cow version, the four legs being potentially the four corners of earth, things like
yeah,
that, kind of bringing to mind foundation and everything else. And then sometimes you'll see actually like the stars within its body, and it'll be painted blue or something like that. And then I'm kind of just noticing too, right in front of its head, it almost looks like an upside down Venus symbol. That's kind of curious.
yeah. That's interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, I did the mathematics for it, and this is just so the 1 2 3 2 1 is similar to the English cipher, which walks up to 7 and back down to 1.
Uh,
Um, and so that is like a mathematical way of basically producing squares. So it's just interesting that this square is encoding 108,
mm,
which is a very highly significant number. But again, we're dealing with like cubic numbers. And
mm,
so it's sort of like a subtle reference to the cube,
mm.
just by having those numbers within the picture.
Gotcha.
So,
Nice, nice.
yeah.
Very interesting.
And the Hadad god, he basically has those three sort of lightning bolts. So
Hmm.
he's essentially Zeus with his lightning bolts, right? And you can see that they can be referenced as either arrows or lightning bolts or whatever. But
Hmm.
by holding the three together, it's like showing the three in one.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But it also, those two sort of symbols, that if you put them together, you actually get the fasces, which is the circle of sticks with the axe in it. And you'll, a lot of the time you'll see, like, because this god here, the sky god, another form of him is the eagle. So he'll often have the either the arrows in his talons, or or the lightning bolts, or the fasces, and that was emblematic of I think Italy and those sort of places. So that's where you get a lot of the eagle symbol is directly from this god, and then the eagle is symbolized as the the bird on the top of the world tree.
Mm,
So it's like the dot on the I, if you like, and it's also the turning of hours, which hours is Horus, and that's related to the falcon, and the
mm-hmm.
falcon is directly and in directly Jupiter and Zeus, so they're all the same. And it's also has a correspondence to hours, obviously, with Horus and hours being the turning, or the lord of time.
Got it. Got it. Good call with the fascist symbol right there, man. It's all
Mm,
right there for you.
mhm,
Makes a lot of sense. Nice. Excellent. So, regarding, my correspondence, which would be the Hierophant card with Taurus, this is a depiction of the Pope, essentially, who's known as a bridge builder. And so he's a bridge builder to what? To the heavens. He's like a mediator between the people and the gods. And so to me, just reminds me of the world axis, and the idea that the world axis is also symbolically a bridge between this domain and the next one. And so that's what I see, that's really just significantly kind of polar or northern in nature. It's not uncommon to have the Hierophant with the crossed keys at his feet. And there's several ways of looking at this, but it could be emblematic of the keys to heaven, the gates to heaven, right? And then there's a whole thing about heaven being at the northern sky, and your soul or whatever ascends to the northern sky, and that is how you exit this plane or domain. And so you already mentioned it, but the bull of heaven idea, the Taurus field, as in Taurus, I think is really interesting. And also too, the Taurus field, looking at it from a top-down perspective, as you've kind of said, it kind of looks like an eye, and so there are several references to the bull's eye in the Thoth deck. And so notice that the bull is like looking right at us. I think that's kind of interesting. And then
mm,
also in the universe card, it shows the four cherubim angels, just like this card on the left. But the bull's eyes are actually the only ones that look swirly. So there's this implied sort of transcendental sort of thing going on there. I'm also reminded of the fact that within the Taurus constellation is the Pleiades, which is 7 stars, and there is so much overlapping symbolism between the 7 stars of Ursa Major, Northern symbolism, and the Pleiades. That's
yeah.
something that I want to unpack at some point. In fact, I'll just say it. Sometimes I wonder, and I've talked to other people about this who aren't like geocentric or anything like that, but it seems to me like the Pleiades, a lot of the symbolism that's attached to it may have started off in the north, and that it got later kind of reassigned or whatever to all of that stuff. So there's a lot of Taurus Pleiades symbolism that corresponds with a lot of the northern polar stuff that I've gotten into. Um, and then this sign, Taurus, is just very, very earthy. And so we are talking a lot about geocentric symbolism here with just the idea behind this presentation and everything. Um so those are some of the things just kind of off the top of my head on how the Hierophant kind of corresponds to what we're getting at over here.
Perfect.
Yeah, man. Cool. So let's
That's
save
it.
Gemini for next time. Dude, this was fantastic. I'm really stoked to do it again. So it looks like next Friday works with you, right?
Yeah, should do. Yep.
Awesome. Well, let's just plan on that. And if you want to let people know like how they can reach you, or if you have any final thoughts, feel free.
Best place is to get me on Telegram, and Mario will put the link for that in below, and also on YouTube. Is probably the easiest. I've got a lot of different things in the works, so yeah, if you join there, you'll be able to message me directly and have a chat.
Yeah, absolutely. And you're very responsive on your Telegram as well. And
Oh yeah, I
so
love it. It's fun.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So no, I love to see it. I wish I could say the same about myself and my channel or whatever, but if you join his Telegram and you ask a question, he'll definitely reply. But Lucas, this was great. We'll be in touch. I'll see you soon. I'm gonna let you go, and then I will get onto some credit stuff here for a few minutes, and then maybe I'll check the chat for a brief moment before I have to get out of here. But this was fun, dude. Thanks again.
Thank you. Thanks so much for having me.
Yeah, you got it, man. All right, see ya.
So yeah.
Nice. Cool. LC King, man, he knows a lot of stuff. I really, really appreciate that guy. Um, so as far as what's going on with me, and all of that, I would love to stick around for a little bit longer. I do have an engagement I have to make here in a few minutes. So I'm gonna get to my credits, and then I'll check the chat for a brief moment, and then I have to scram. Luckily, I don't have to travel too far. But if you guys want to support the channel, there's multiple ways of doing it. If you're unaware, I have a website. It's symbolicstudies.com. You can find my, all of my links basically at symbolicstudies.com. Please, if you guys are interested, join my Patreon. So that's patreon.com/symbolic studies. It's very, very much appreciated. I think I have like 22 or 24 people at the moment, and I am super, super grateful for that. You guys get top priority with messages and suggestions and questions and things like that. I'm also available for readings and study sessions. So you can direct message me or text me at 503-893-4606. I'm only offering half-hour readings at the moment. That seems just to work better with my schedule and things like that. So that's kind of the deal. And then as far as study sessions are concerned, I've had people reach out for all sorts of different things, wanting to know more about a certain sign or a card, or they want like one-on-one, lessons with like the tarot, things like that. So if you think there's something that I could help you out with, in terms of symbolism, please let me know, and I would be happy to set something up. And then also, I'm available for art direction and design. I mentioned it last time, but for a long time, I wanted to keep like symbolic studies separate from my professional life. And I just don't see why I need to do that anymore. And so everything is merging, everything is blending together. I'm being more mercurial about things. And so if you're interested in anything along these lines and we're a good fit, we'll make something happen. Symbolicstudies@gmail.com is how you can reach me for that. And if you're interested in seeing my portfolio, excuse me, I will send you a PDF with some of my work. So you can check out my videos and stuff. And I've done a lot of things on the channel here, but there's a lot of design work that you guys have not seen that I've done. I've done many album covers and t-shirts and posters and ads for people. I've designed commercials and things like that. So if you run a small business or a large business and you guys are in need, let me know. Also, my girlfriend has a podcast. It's called The Healing Home, and I believe she is on her like 13th or 14th episode by now. And it's awesome. She has top tier guests, in my opinion. And so you guys should definitely check that out. It's here on YouTube at Michelle's Healing Home. I also have a link in the description. Cool. So I believe that'll do it as far as this stuff is concerned. Let's see what's up in the chat. I have not checked the chat at all because it is so distracting. Nice. I see some familiar faces. What's up, Gordy? Yes, indeed. It is dinner time for me for sure. Hello, Slick. Nice to see you, man. Slick is awesome. Slick Dissident on YouTube. If you guys are really into symbolism, this dude brings it. He knows so much stuff. He's exposed me to so many interesting weaves and insights. Yeah, love his perspective. Hell yeah, Juan on Juan. Juan has an awesome show, the Juan on Juan podcast. I've been on there before a couple times. Really, really good stuff over there. Super stoked for what he's doing. And he gets into a lot of fascinating rabbit holes, to say the least. Yes, I agree, Slick. Michelle is awesome. But I have to say that. Yeah, Jesse. Aldebaran is the bullseye where the Nazis went. Yeah, I almost was going to mention something about Aldebaran or Aldebaran being the bullseye. That was a whole weave that I was like so interested in for a long time. The Vril Society, the bullseye stuff and everything. 100%. I've made a couple of videos, I think like a year or two ago about that. But yeah, you're spot on with that. Let's see here. Anything else? Cool. Arcturus, Taurus, Arcturus, Bearward, and Boetes, the wagoner from Greek, ultimately from pi root. I don't know how to say that word. Ox, bull, cow. Very interesting. Yeah. I hear you. Let's see. Anyone else in the chat? Just thank you guys, honestly, for being here. Much, much appreciated. And I am not going to schedule anything after next week's live stream. I've done that twice now, and I don't really care for it. I don't like knowing that I have something to do right after this. You're right, Nomad, for sure. All right, guys. Thank you so much. I'll be back with Lucas next week. Until then, take care.